Hello, I'm Jamil Ellis, and this is the very first episode of The Last Magical Negro Speaks. Fade music. Hello, I'm Jamil Ellis once again. This is the first episode of Last Magical Negro Speaks. I did a show at some point called Magical Negro Speaks by the similar name in 2013 in the New York International Fringe Festival. And I did it again as a live stream show here at CultureHub in New York in 2014. And you can find all the details of that by coming back later. And it's earlier in the stream. I played some from that live show, and I played some of the, and I also played the full live stream. I think I'm going to do that again. You can find all the details at magicalnegrospeaks.com as well. Or you can Google Magical Negro Speaks, which may or may not flag you on one of Jeff Sessions' investigations. I can't guarantee that, but you will find me as well. So it's been a long time since I did something creative, something this creative. I think I have been more creative in the last couple of months. I've been doing a podcast called How Do We Begin, which you also might have heard. But since I did that show, it's been a little bit. Life has gotten in the way of like major creativity, but in a good way. Life is good. Job, kid, family, taking time. So, I want to do a quick bio on me in case those of you who don't know me, and I hope you'll be getting to know me in the coming episodes. I was born and raised in New York City, mostly in Brooklyn. My mom's a retired librarian. My dad a retired judge. I have a brother. He is a teacher. So grew up in Brooklyn. I went to Stuyvesant High School in Manhattan. And then I went on to Columbia, where I majored in computer engineering. I'm a technology person by trade with a creative bend. But I've been working in technology for about the past 18 years. Currently, I am the CTO of a company called Block Power. But I worked a lot in media, in HBO, Major League Baseball, NFL, a lot of video stuff. And so this is kind of a natural blend of that, my work here, that I'm doing this right now. What else can I say? As I've always been doing creative work, I was a member of a comedy troupe, etc. In New York. It was performed in and around New York City for about 20 years. A bunch of kids that I went to high school with. And I've shown you some of the creative work I've done thus far. And then family, married, wonderful wife, Larissa, little 4-year daughter, 4.5. I think you have to use the half years with kids. My daughter's name is Lesha. And yeah, so that's the quick bio of myself. And I think it helps that the context is like, why are we doing this? Why are we here? So I went. This current streak of creativity, which has been a good hot streak, started. There was a storytelling event called the Nat that I did back in September. One of my good friends, Maurice James, was also involved in that, and we said we gotta do something creative. And so after that, we started doing. We started just trying to get a podcast together just to do that. Talking to do something on a weekly basis, and that's worked out well. And so, like, I'm expanding it. My podcasting empire is growing. It's not just that; it's this now. The story I told in that is very relevant to like why doing this podcast to begin with. It was a story about. I was thinking about the things we don't say sometimes. There's lots of. How do I say this? We live in an interesting time where men with torches can walk the streets and shout racial epithets and religious epithets. And I think in seeing Trump's rise to power, I wonder about some of the times the things not said. I think I bring up the point sometimes that here in New York, people so out of sorts about Trump coming to power, but if you look at the mayors that were here in New York City, from Giuliani to Bloomberg, and the racial politics like stop and frisk. It's like, well, are you that surprised that a rich businessman who has comes to power, his thoughts on race so somewhat suspect? It's like, well, we kind of did that here in New York, and I was thinking about around that time I voted against Bloomberg like every time, and the issue of stop and frisk and racial profiling is something I think about a lot, and for me it was a pivotal issue. And I realized I don't remember talking a lot. Sometimes you don't want to talk about things that are uncomfortable. You don't want to make people uncomfortable, and I think I didn't make enough people uncomfortable during all those years here. And I was like, what part does that play if you remain silent? I mean, if I didn't say anything to when someone's like, well, but I think a businessman will be good for New York. I mean, screw that. It's okay with that. Like, it's okay that stop and frisk. Well, that's a complex issue. That's over there. And like when you let these other issues go, when you let people, if something's important to you, like why would you stay silent in that? And so I turned 40 and last October, and one of my commitments to myself is to not be as silent, and that's kind of where we got to today. So what's this podcast all about? So Magical Negro Speaks is all about the magical Negro. If it's a trope, and a magical Negro, that's a magical black man that's there to help the protagonist or whatever they want. They don't have any needs for themselves. And in the show, I look at not only the Magic Negro, but other portrayals of African Americans in media. And I think that is still incredibly relevant to everything going on. So I wanted a place to talk about those things. I think it's important. It's vastly important to keep that conversation going on. So I'll talk about that. Talk about technology as well, things that I like to talk about. I think it's important as you see what's going on. There's a certain in technology. I think there's been a reckoning with what's going on with Facebook, people canceling their Facebook accounts. I mean, people really didn't think they were collecting your data? I actually did a Facebook app a while ago, and I remember it's like all the honor system, and it's been like that for a while. Like developers can do pretty much whatever they want to, but please don't just spider all the user data and don't store the data. But it's not something that's heavily policed clearly, since if you've been paying attention, people have been collecting. I think a lot of technology sometimes there is a lack of responsibility of what it does to the community at large. I had this episode that we talked in a podcast. We talk about disruption, and people get very excited about disruption, but disrupting people. Well, disruption means disrupting people's lives. They don't understand the context, and just creating a technology for technology's sake is not. There's always consequence to that, and I think that's important to keep that discussion going. So I will keep that discussion going. What else is this podcast about? I'm a dad in Brooklyn. I'll talk about that sometimes. Sure. Yeah. Looking at my list here of things here. So yeah, I think there is, what can I say about, I'm going to talk some more about technology and responsibility. I think, oh yeah, another pet peeve of mine, I know what I was going to say. I see a lot of people in the technology community sometimes being very, very, getting very up in arms about the openness of and keeping technology as it is. as something that's complete free speech, free of any kind of, it's either decentralized or everyone should have access to it, and free access to do whatever they want on the internet. You can't censor anybody. And lately there's been it entered the conversation a little bit around the time of Charlottesville, because a lot of people were, why does Stormfront have access to spread their propaganda through different like big internet outlets, and people got there's a certain population of people who are very like, hey, this technology, you should be able to do what you want, and that's fine. I hear a lot of people being very passionate about the ability to do what you want, but not so much about the access to benefit from technology. So, if you really believe that technology is something that betters the planet, betters the world, then where are the strong efforts to make it so that everyone has access to technology? Where are the apps that look to benefit everybody? Are those at the forefront? I would argue no. There's a lot of effort, and not always on making technology that is better for society. Anyway, I'll let the siren pass. Do you hear the siren? So that's my slight rant on technology. I'll talk about a variety of things. I have a great rant on crypto coins. You're going to love it. But you'll have to tune into another episode, because I'm not going to talk about it now. I'm going to talk about something else. There was a New York Times article recently I posted and got it, and it's got an interesting. Let's see if I can pull up the graphic here. How do I pull the graphic? Oh, there it is, Media Player 2. Give me a second, and we're going to. So there's an article in the Times, and it was talking about how black boys raised in America, even in the wealthiest families and living in some of the most well-to-do neighborhoods, they still earn less in adulthood than white boys with similar backgrounds, according to this study that traced the lives of millions of children. White boys who grew up rich are likely to remain that way, and black boys who are at the top, however, are more likely to become poor than to stay wealthy in their own adult households. A very interesting, like some would say, like, duh, although some would not, because some people aren't thinking about that. But I think about that. It's interesting. So they had the divide is the income disparity is much greater in is much greater, particularly for black boys, and so what does that mean? There was an interesting. I posted this when I posted to Facebook. Someone had responded. Nami, I'll give you a shout out. It was about pointed to an article to someone who said they've been interviewed for the New York Times, and he said, "I think this is an important point to make, because even though black boys are overwhelmingly affected," he said, "well, don't let this be about that black women don't need attention." Important point to be made. There's a lot of elements into this. I think what most of all it says is that race is an element to, and that there's not a simple solution to this. They looked at a lot of different factors in the study. They tried to they did this. They looked at how much adult attention, and all the things that would affect the actual outcomes. So fascinating. I recommend all take a read. I know it's sometimes uncomfortable to talk about some of these things, but I think the outcomes are some benefit. I'll tell you my chief takeaways of two takeaways that I had from this article. I was like, wow. we joke around and always say that being black, I have to be twice as you have to be twice as good. My dad, my mom always instilled that in me, that we don't get the chance to make the same errors. And wow, is that correct? The numbers don't lie. Clearly, missteps can happen, and so many different societal factors can play in, and there are odds against success there. So, one takeaway. Let's see. And let's see, where are we doing on time? We're doing okay on time. But so anyway, so you get an idea of the kinds of things that are on my mind that I'm talking about. Someone had asked me why title it The Last Magical Negro Speaks. I don't know the answer to that, quite honestly. I took a little bit from Star Wars, Last Jedi. I think what I want is, as I think about the title, it's mostly I'd like to explore being the last. Well, I'm not a magical Negro. It's I want to get to the point where there is no magical Negro, so that it is the end. And I think to do that, to get to that point where pie in the sky, where we are all really talking and understanding the whole human experience, that's what we're trying to get. We're going to have this conversation. It's going to be difficult, but we're going to have this conversation. So that is, that's some of the themes that I want to look at. And I want to hear from you out there in the interwebs. If you create content or you're passionate about the things that I'm talking about, then let's talk. You can come on, be a guest. We can cross-promote, whatever it takes to get a positive message of change out there. And yeah, and hopefully this will be the last Magical Negro Speaks will be the end of this. I don't know that it will be, but we're gonna get somewhere together, you and I and Black Panther. Wakanda forever. And we're gonna play some funky music to get us out of here. That's right.